this evening we're getting into the pesky mite situation and pest management. I mean, anybody that's in beekeeping, you're going to hear about the Varroa mite. I probably have already said it 100 times in this series of classes. It's a problem. I don't know beekeeping without the Varroa mite, and they came on the scene back in the 80s, and nobody's figured out how to get rid of them. And they're not natural to the European honeybee that is what we have here. So getting into them, they're also called the Varroa destructor. You'll hear that term used a lot when talking about mites. Yeah, they're the most devastating parasite to the honeybee. I mean, there's other types of mites, there's tracheal mites, but the Varroa destructor, that's the one that causes all kinds of issues, starting in the larva stage. And it's the thing that every beekeeper, we're treating them, we're managing our mite loads right along with our colony. And you can see the mites there on the larva. They're just, I mean, imagine a tick the size of your fist. That's what it's like to the honeybee. And imagine, 5, 6, 7 of them on you, just, chewing away at your fatty tissue in your body, and that's what they're feeding on. And then not only mention that, bees have an extra skeletal body, so when that mite's on there feeding, and their body's not forming right. So they were first discovered in Asia, on Asian honeybees in 1904, which is a long time ago, but then they migrated to the European honeybees what, do I have that down? I think it was the 60s. They migrated because of, beekeepers shipping them in, taking them out, and they got attached, and now they got on Europeans, honeybees, and then we somehow got them over here as well. They arrived in 1987. So that's, it hasn't been that long ago, but they arrived with a bang and just caused all kinds of issues since then. But yeah, they weaken the immune system, and they decrease the body size of the bee too. So that's another key thing to kind of see whenever, if you can, as you're in your bees, you'll start taking notice to some of these bees just look smaller, and it's the Varroa feeding on them, and lessening their body weight. And so it's a non-natural parasite to the European honeybee, which I kind of already said how they come from the Asian honeybees. So the Asian honeybee, the reason why Asian honeybees are still around, and the Asian honeybee has actually become somewhat resistant to the Varroa mite. Now, I've had the question come up about, well, why don't we use Asian honeybees, or why don't we, crossbreed and try to get some of their resistance? Well, Asian honeybees have a whole nother host of problems. They got all kinds of other diseases and sicknesses that we don't want to touch. And they were the first to get American foul brood and everything else. So there's a big restriction on messing around with Asian honeybees. So we don't want them around, even though they have built up a resistance to the Varroa mite. So there's, as you're reading and, trying to find bees to buy, or just studying bees, the study of trying to genetically breed bees to be resistant is an ongoing thing. And, people will make leaps to getting a bee that's more resistant to Varroa mites, but, nobody's figured out a bee that can totally be resistant. And resistance will come from bees chewing the legs off of the larva, killing them, trying to get them off, being hygienic a little bit, and uncapping the brood. But I would be careful about, if anybody tells you, my bees don't get treated, they're resistant, are they? I would kind of argue that. Now I can see, so resistant and tolerant is, I'll use the word tolerant when I talk about honeybees, because I have seen honeybees that are a lot more tolerant of Varroa mite. And what I mean by that is, you might have a bad mite infestation, but the honeybee colony is just still rocking and rolling. They're not even bugged by them. And that'll come a lot with your Africanized bees. Africanized honeybees, they got mites, but they're just more tolerant to them, and they just keep on rocking and rolling. And it can also cause, I've noticed, it's a big stressor on the honeybee. So, we all know Africanized bees as being wild and crazy and mean. well, they're loaded with mites too, you know. So it's a stressor on them that's, you know, making them be a little more agitated. So the mite is completely dependent upon the honeybee for survival. And it's frustrating too, because no honeybees, no Varroa mites, but we need our honeybees. So Australia has been fighting it, because Australia was the last continent on Earth that did not have Varroa mites. And they would get them, and then as soon as they get them, they'd isolate it and burn everything inside the apiary and just keep on isolating. I think I heard that they finally broke loose and now they're everywhere down there, but I don't know that for sure. But yeah, I mean, the whole life cycle of a Varroa mite is totally dependent on there being honeybees to feed on. So Varroa mite symptoms. I mean, if you got honeybees, you got Varroa mites is what I say. Like, they're in there somewhere. You don't not have them. And I get a lot of people, you know, buying bees and then coming back and, you know, oh, my bees died, what happened? And I'm like, well, what'd you use to treat? I didn't treat, I didn't see no Varroa. They're in there. They're in there somewhere. Most of your Varroa is behind the cappings, your cap brood anyway. So, I mean, you might take mite counts and not get any mites in your count, but that doesn't mean you have no mites. So always come up with a treatment plan because you have them. But the other symptoms will be a lot of dead adult bees, shorter abdomens, deformed wings, and then also a dramatic decline in the population of the colony. It'll start dipping. And as you keep bees in this area and say you have a mite problem, you'll start learning when your decline is going to start happening. And typically what I'm noticing is if I have a bad mite infestation, your decline is going to start hitting at the nectar dearth around end of July. It's going to just start dumping off because your adults are dying. That's what's happening. So when I was trying to research for this class and come up with diseases from mites, there is a long list of diseases that come from mites. And I didn't put them all on here because I don't know what all these diseases even are. You know, they got all these different names for them. But the most common one that you'll see is the deformed wing virus. And that's just like, you know, you might take mite counts, you might not see no mites, but you'll still see a deformed wing virus. And that's when your population of mites is starting to get higher than it should be. And you'll see that bee there, it can't fly, it can't do nothing to help, it's just gonna die. And that's just the disease that they get from the Varroa feeding on them in the larva state. Whenever they're in their final stage, growing under the cap brood, they get that deformed wing virus. The other viruses also, why I didn't really put them in here is because you won't see it, because the bees will just die. And then they die outside of the hive. So how do you know? You know, if we got skunks in our area. Skunks eat bees like candy. So as soon as the bees die on the ground, the skunks are right there cleaning them up anyway. So we don't really get to see our dead bees outside the hives, but you will see bees crawling around the comb with deformed wing virus. And, you know, the acute bee paralysis, it's kind of the same as the cashmere bee virus. They have a lot of similarities. It's both paralysis, but once they're paralyzed, they just get drug out of the hive and thrown out. So you don't know it, you don't see it. And there's a host of other ones. They migrate horizontally meaning when the adult bee hatches and climbs out of the cell, that Varroa is going to cling on to her and follow her and then drop down into another cell. And then essentially, you know, infect that cell. Once that egg hatches, they'll feed on that larva. So this period can last for different durations, which is another struggle too. So like, it could be during the winter time, they'll just kind of stay dormant and not really doing anything. Or it could be, you know, in the summertime, 5 to 11 days and be a lot more fast reproduction. But there's not really a set time frame of how fast they're going to repopulate. They can kind of hold off or or do whatever there. So they enter the cell of both worker and drone brood, but they prefer drone brood. And drone brood is, drones are just fatter. They're a lot more to feed on. And a lot of people, so like when you break your hive in half, there'll be a burr comb in between the frames. And that's a quick thing. I do it kind of second nature. As soon as I split my hive apart and I see drone brood, I'm flipping the drone brood around. I'm checking for mites. I'm checking to see, are there mites crawling around on the larva? It's a quick and easy way to see it. Now, because a healthy drone population is key to see for colony health, and that's kind of the reason. If you see a lot of drones, that means the mites aren't infecting them quite so bad, and they're healthy, it's good. Even though drones do nothing for the colony outside of mate with the queen, you still want to see a big, healthy drone population. So hygienic behavior is a big trait that beekeepers breed for. And when I say beekeepers, we do it too. Hygienic behavior is good for cleaning out, for the bees to clean out cells. And Varroa resistance, we select breed for that as well. But it's not a for sure things. And they found that the Varroa mite is actually becoming kind of resistant to hygienic behavior from the bees. What I mean by that is whenever the larva gets in their final stage of the cap brood. So the bees will cap over the larva for their final stage of development. And the hygienic behavior is when the honeybee comes back to that capping and rips it open to clean out, to try to rip out the larva, to try to clean out whatever fungus might be in there. That's hygienic behavior. Well, what they've noticed is now the mites are actually getting resistant to that by hiding underneath the larva now. So when the larva is laying in there, now the mites are going underneath, feeding on it, and now the hygienic behavior isn't even helping. What the mites do inside the cells, like I said, they feed on the larva. They scratch open a hole in the larva and start feeding on the fat tissues. So within 70 hours, the mite starts laying her first eggs, which is always a male. I don't know why they're designed that way, but that's what they do. And every 30 hours, she lays another egg to be a female. So what happens is the sisters mate with the brothers, and that's how they reproduce in the cell. And this is the bigger the colony, the faster the collapse on a bad mite infestation is going to be. So and I see it in myself every year and clients every year where they're like, oh, my colony was huge, it was booming, and then just died in the fall. What happened? Well, when you got a lot of brood, you got a lot of homes for the mites to live. And that's where the mites thrive. That's where they want to be, is in that last stage of the bee's development, in that cap brood. That's where they're safe. That's where they're feeding the most. So when you got just a booming hive, it's, it can be the bee's demise. And it's such a double-edged sword because we want our colonies big, right? We want them to be just thriving, but knocking them back, keeping the mite levels down. I mean, splitting them and keeping the brood down is also a form of mite treatment. And guys over in Europe do it a lot, where they actually give a whole brood break to the colony by caging the queen, and they'll leave her in there, let all the brood hatch. That way, now there's nowhere for the mites to live. Now the hygienic bees can start killing them, and then they'll release the queen again to just go about it. That's another natural, organic way to treat for mites. It's not foolproof, and certain times of the year you definitely don't want to do that because, in the springtime, you might want to try it, but then again, you might miss out on some of the honey flow too, so depends on what you want to do with the bees. So this is a graph from Randy Oliver. He has the website Scientific Beekeeping. He's out in California. He's always doing all kinds of stuff. I love reading his studies. But he created a graph for kind of the life cycle of the bees. And you can see the mite population in the red line skyrocketing with the bees population, right? And what'll happen is the mite population continues going up, and then the honeybee will start coming down, but the mites are still up, right? So that's where your problem kind of comes in. Now he's over in California, right? So his graph's gonna be different than what ours looks like. So ours, your peak population for both is always going to be that early, end of June, early July is when you want to get treatment on your bees. That's when you want to try to knock back them Varroa mites. And also you want them Varroa mites knocked back before they start raising wintertime bees, because you want your wintertime bees hardy and healthy. So the different treatments for Varroa mites. You got formic acid, oxalic acid, thymol, and amitraz, Apivar. Of these, Apivar is the only synthetic non-organic treatment.
Which one is?
Apivar, the amitraz. It's a synthetic blend of sorts that it's just for mites. They use it on cattle, but at a much higher dosage of amitraz and stuff. But this is stuff that's approved here in the U.S. to use for Varroa mites. So Formic Pro is or Mite Away Quick Strips. I think it used to be Mite Away Quick Strips, but they changed their name. That's formic acid, and it's a very strong treatment. And I just recommend be very careful when you use it, because it will kill up to like 15% of your bees, and you don't know if that 15% is your queen. And it's very strong. And if you like open it up and smell it, it's got this odor that just kind of burns your eyes. And it's very strong, but it's very good kill all. Like it'll really kill out a lot of stuff, a lot of mites. And like guys will use it in the spring, and because they use it in the springtime, because if it kills your queen in the spring, well, you got so much time to, things are just booming. So, okay, get a new queen in there and let them rock and roll. Or they use it in the fall, whenever they go broodless and things, and they just really hit it hard. Like, I don't use it in the fall because I just haven't, because of my worry about knocking the colony too far back right before they go in the wintertime. I think more so guys will do that in the South or in the far West. They'll use it in the fall. I just don't, not that I don't recommend it, it's just, that's my worry about using it. But I would, like if I had a bad infestation coming in the spring, I would definitely hit them with Formic right then and there. But yeah, it's a strong treatment. You gotta watch your outside along with your inside temperature. So I think that one was 85 degrees outside, or 85 degrees inside the hive. Inside the hive. So it might be 85 outside, but it's actually 100 inside. So, and I have seen with this and Apigard, which we'll get into then, guys using like half treatments, trying to knock down the dosage a little bit. I haven't really played around with that too much, just to be honest, so I can't speak for it, but I have seen that done. Oxalic acid vapor is there's a couple different oxalic acid treatments, but vapor is the one I have the most experience with. This is what I've been running around doing now. And I did it last month, or end of November, early December, and then I did it for second round now. And vapor, I love it. I think it works great. It's another organic treatment. And it really kills the mites, but it does not kill mites behind cat brood. So it can be, you do it in the summertime, doesn't work, because you got so much brood in there. It's not killing the mites behind the brood. Now guys have gone in cycles with it. They will do it on like a 3-day cycle to try to, as things hatch, keep on hitting them, or else give them a brood break, right? Cage the queen and then hit them with the vapor. But you got to time it out, right? So if you cage the queen, well, now you got to wait 12 days so everything hatches, and then hit them with the vapor. And that's one way to do an organic treatment. And like I said, there's a lot of things I like about it, but the vapors are very harmful to you if you inhale them. That's what I don't like. So I always make sure I'm up by myself and I got the full mask on, and I've had that, there's that white cap on top of that. What it is just a hot plate and a regulator, and it heats up to 230 degrees. And then once you pour that oxalic acid crystals on there, it vaporizes it and shoots it into the hive. But I've had that white cap blow off and like acid kind of come flying out, and It burnt me on the hand. So it can be a dangerous thing, just doing it. Just be mindful of it, because there's a little, I don't have a picture of the tool, but there's like a little hose that comes out. And if that hose gets plugged, that's when that white cap will blow off and then acid's kind of flying. And then, like I said, you want to be wearing the 3M organic vapor protection canisters, so that you don't want that stuff in your lungs or anything. So no mite treatment is approved to have on when honey supers are on, but oxalic acid vapor was approved for that. But my response to that is, who cares? When the honey supers are on, to treat them with oxalic acid vapor doesn't matter, because that's when your population is at its peak. That's when all the cap brood's in there. It doesn't do you any good. So definitely be mindful of it. If you want to get some honey off of them, get the honey out of there before you treat with anything, organic or not. It's just not good. So this is thymol Apogard. This is another one that you got to watch your temperature outside on. And I do see guys doing like half treatments on this, but I can't speak for their success on it. Because they'll do like a long duration and just do like half doses in the heat of the summer to try to knock it down. This is another very strong potent, and it's the vapors that it's producing inside the hive that's killing the bees off, or killing the mites off. This cannot be used with honey supers as well. And this is another one that you don't want to get on your skin. You don't want to be breathing it. Even though it's organic, it's still harmful. Like you don't want to be messing with it too much. And this is another one that can be a bee killer as well, especially if you use it when it gets too hot. It can really, sometimes your bees will totally just leave the hive. They'll abscond. And they'll do that, I should say, with any of the treatments. For some reason, some of them might just not like it and just get out of there and just leave, which is frustrating. And this is the synthetic treatment. This is Apovar. It comes in the strips. You take 2 strips per box and you put it in between brood frames. And this is probably the most popular treatment because you don't have to worry about your temperatures. I mean, you can't use it with honey supers, obviously. You don't want synthetic stuff in your honey. But it's very popular in the sense that it's easy. You put it in, and it's proven to work, and there's no proof of mite growing resistant to it. But we try to stay away from it just because I just try to stay organic. I don't like the idea of it. But I'm not gonna lie, there's some times where it's just necessary. The mite loads are too high at a bad time of year. I gotta hit them with something, or else I'm gonna lose the bees. So it's a tool, right? So just knowing how to use these tools. And these strips stay in for 6 weeks, which is 2 brood cycles. So it takes 21 days for a bee to hatch. So it's in there for 2 brood cycles. That way all the cells in the colony can get opened up and the amitraz can get in. The bees, how it gets spread is the bees crawl on the strips, carry it with them. As the nurse bees are cleaning out the comb or getting here and there, it's getting on the mites and killing the mites. That's the idea of it. But with using any of these treatments, don't assume it worked. That's the other thing. Just because you did it doesn't mean it actually took care of nothing. And then also, don't use the same thing over and over and over and over again, because all you're doing is breeding resistance. I think the chickens get mites too, don't they? And we got hogs, and for deworming hogs, you can't deworm them with the same thing over and over and over again, because now the worms are going to grow resistance. It's the same thing with mites. If you keep hitting them with the same thing, they're just breeding resistance. The bees will begin, being resistant to it. Now they say mites will not be resistant to amitraz, and I can't speak for that, but I naturally do it anyway, because I'll hit them. If I would hit them with this in the summertime, well, I'm hitting them with oxalic acid in the fall and in the winter, and then back to another cycle. So, or else, if you're doing formic in the spring. But that'll be next class. Is what I'll do is the whole year of beekeeping, and for what it looks like here in Berkeley Springs, what I do on a yearly schedule of when I'm looking for what. So oxalic acid is probably my favorite right now.
Is that the vapor one?
That's the vapor one. But so whenever if I get into the pollination game, my bees are going to pick up a lot more mites from other beekeepers. That's the situation where I see myself having to use an Apivar, because it's just, you're getting such a bad load. But I have had years where my mite loads are staying in check. They're staying in check when I'm hitting them with the vapor in the wintertime, and they're not building back up, and I have enough time to hit them again in the fall before things get bad. And then I would say Formic is probably the other most popular, but like I said, that one's always gets me nervous just using it, because I hate losing bees. And it just makes me, nervous, because the bees can totally abscond just from hating it, but it's a good killer. I can't argue against that. It's a good killer of the mites. Small hive beetles. So small hive beetles aren't really a problem up here, but to a small colony, they could be. And as far as a problem, they're a stressor, right? I mean, stressors on anything or anybody is not a good thing. So what they do is they can infest a weaker colony, and especially infest a weaker colony in a wet, shady location. The hive beetles will thrive there. So, if you're trying to make a split and you make a nuke, a 2-frame nuke, and you put it in your woods by a stream or something in a small colony, the hive beetles are going to find it and they can infest it quick. So typically the honeybees can fend them off. Down in the south, they can really get bad. But what they do is they feed on the pollen that the bees store away, and the females, beetles, will lay eggs in the pollen, and the larva will eat it, and it just creates this disgusting mess, and it just rancid smell. But that's what they do. And the bees, when I pop my lid, I'll see hive beetles scurrying around. It's not a panic moment when you see it. Sometimes I'll take my hive tool and tool them to death, smack them around. But it's, they're there. Once they're in this adult form, the damage is kind of already done. That's not when you want to get them and kill them. It's more when they're in the larva state. You can see the kind of nasty mess they can make. What they do is, once they hit a point, they will come out of the hive and burrow into the ground. And what some people do to treat for that is use permethrin, which is another chemical. They'll pour it all around the hive and drench it so it saturates the ground, and it'll kill the larva. That's really the way, if you have an infestation, that's the way to get rid of them. It's just because killing them as an adult, it doesn't, whatever, the damage is already done, but killing them at the larva state, that's how you get rid of them, is whenever they burrow down. Or, this is something I just learned, is they can take up to 100 days to pupate in the wintertime. So they might be in the hive all winter long, no, not all winter long, but a good time before they decide to come out. So wintertime won't necessarily kill them all. The good thing is about our winters is it's too long for the 100 days. So that's why they're not really that big of an issue up here. But it's whenever you get nukes coming up out of Georgia and getting sold, which happens way more than people think it does. I mean, a lot of bees people buy are coming out of the south. And it's not that bees out of the south are bad, but they're just carrying a lot of these things with them up here. So sometimes you could get a bad infestation up here from them. So you'll see beetle blasters, that's that black one up there. You put vegetable oil in there, put it in between the frames, and what'll happen is bees will patrol, and all of a sudden a hive beetle will try to find little crevices in there to hide. So they'll run into that thing and drown. I think they're junk, to be honest. You're not catching that many beetles. And plus, like I said, that's not really the way to totally get rid of them. The problem's in the ground beneath you that's going to come back up. The permethrin, that's what I said about soaking in the ground. But that's a chemical. I've heard of people putting really thick plastic underneath their hives to keep the larvae from burrowing into the ground. So when they come out and hit the plastic, they'll dry out in the sun and essentially be done at that point. I've used Swiffer pads, dry Swiffer pads, and put it on the top before. That will catch a lot of adult beetles. That if you have a bad infestation, I would use the dry Swiffer pads over the beetle blasters every time. Because what'll happen is the little legs will get tangled up in it, and then they'll die, and it doesn't affect the honeybees. So that was a great tip I learned a couple years back, and I just used it some this year on some hives that had a bunch of them that I was trying to get rid of before winter time. But another easy thing to do is keep your hive in the sun. Hive beetles hate the sun. So keeping them out in the sun, it's gonna help the colony manage them a lot easier. Wax moths, they can be an issue for a small colony. And they're more so an issue for if you just got comb you want to save till next year, and they'll burrow in, they'll lay an egg in the comb, and you'll see like that bottom picture, the larva kind of burrows underneath and just totally destroys it. And on a smaller colony, they can get into frames that the colony isn't using and destroy that comb. But the easiest way to manage from wax moths is don't give the bees more space than they're able to handle. That's kind of good practice for every time. Like don't get a nuke and then put it into this thing and then put another box on top of it right away. They're not ready for that. They can't manage that much space yet. So just let them, only give them enough space to manage it properly, and wax moths won't be an issue. And then when you have a box full of comb and you don't want the wax moths to destroy it, don't leave it like this. Because what you're doing is you're giving that moth shade. They'll get in there and just totally destroy it. You want to just leave the box on end. Let it in the sun, let the air get through it. Wax moths won't touch it. So, and I've heard it said that wax moths only go after brood comb because there's proteins left in it. Wax is like a sponge. It absorbs everything. And they only go after brood comb, and that's what they're feeding on in there. Honeycomb, there's nothing in there that they want that benefits them, but it's a practice of mine for honey supers and brood boxes. I leave on end. I don't want wax moths destroying my stuff. So brood diseases. This is a big topic and can cause issues at different times of the year. Chalk brood is probably one of the most popular ones. And it's one that can come simply because of a wet and up and down spring. And what'll happen is bees will go into ramp up stage coming out of winter time, especially carniolans. They explode quickly. Like the queen will go nuts and she'll start laying up, and then all of a sudden you'll get cold and there'll be a fungus forming, and it'll cause chalk brood. So just a little bit about it. It's a fungus, and the spores germinate in the larva's gut. And this is how a lot of the brood diseases happen, is it gets into the larva's digestive system, and essentially the larva starves. And you'll see this, it's kind of the same repetitive thing throughout. We go over a couple brood diseases here. It kind of happens the same way. And you'll see it in this. That's a key thing that you got chalk brood. These mummies up here. You'll see that at the bottom or thrown out in front of your hive. When the bees are cleaning out the dead larva, you'll see them mummies. That's key that you got chalk brood. Now, sometimes chalk brood can clear itself up. Sometimes you got to replace the infected queen. A lot of times, a strong colony can do a lot. So sometimes it just happened over springtime. You had a hot spell, and then a cold or a wet spell where a fungus grew and started infecting your larva and your queen, and it happened. And then once it get out of there, the colony can fix itself sometimes. But that's why it's really popular that this happens in the springtime, because your colony is still small, but they're trying to grow. So stuff hasn't hatched yet. So there's not enough bees to take care of all and clean all the cells, and then a fungus can start. So chalk brood, it's not something to panic about. It happens. I mean, I have it happen in some yards every year. It's just, you do what you can to fix it and let the bees do the rest. Stone brood, it's not as common, but it's similar to chalk brood. I've noticed stone brood can happen a lot with stress, which so can chalk brood. Moving bees a lot can cause chalk brood. Putting stress on the colonies can cause it, but it has a key feature in that picture. You can see, just kind of looks a little different. And it's infected comb and infected queen, and then you fix it the same way as chalk brood. Replace your queen, replace the comb, give them more young bees to help clean. Because remember, young bees are your nurse bees. So give them more resources to clean it up. So European foul brood. This is one that has come around, and this affects all ages, not just larvae. This is a little bit more of a serious one. It's ingested by larva again. It's a bacteria, not a fungus. So most of the other brood diseases come from a fungus. This is a bacteria, and it gets in the digestive system, and then it essentially, the larva starves to death because it starts multiplying in there and starts, fighting for nutrition. So once the larva is dead, it spreads by the nurse bees, and they carry it out, and then the bees, pull it out with their teeth, and now, bees communicate through their tongue, and they're spreading it. So, that's the first point, is another way it spreads. Once it weakens, now it's susceptible to robbing, and robbing happens quickly, and what that is other colonies, they pick on each other, right? So if there's nothing guarding it, they're gonna come take all the honey out and rob all the pollen. So that's how it spreads. And with all these brood diseases, I always recommend just clean comb. Remember, your comb is a sponge. It's absorbing everything. Rotating your comb, keeping clean comb. There is a treatment for European foul brood, and it's terramycin. And that, I think you need a vet I've never had it to where I need it, but I think you got to get somebody with a degree to come out and actually administer it. But with these with something like European, I often, if I would get it, I would probably just get rid of the comb, just pitch it, take it out and just throw it away. American foul brood, this is the big one. You don't ever want American foul brood. This is what every bee inspector is looking for. American foul brood is the worst. It's a fatal bacterial disease, and it's caused, this is a fungus again, and this one is scary because it can be dormant or kind of be existent in the comb for 50 years. So this is another reason why don't ever use somebody else's comb. Especially that hasn't been taken care of by the bees. And I got more information up there about how it works, but I don't quite understand how it works either. This is just stuff, from research. And it doesn't really affect the adult bees because they all die at the larva stage. But it's the problem with American that I see is you have American, your colony died, you don't really know why. Well, then you go get another nuke, you put it in there, your colony dies. Then you give it up and give it to somebody else, and now it's just, or else you got it, and then I got hives within 2 miles of you. My hives are picking on your hive, and now it's just a bad thing. So what they do is, you got it, burn your hive. Just totally get rid of it. It's just, like, I've heard of people using terramycin to treat for it too, but I don't think terramycin will kill the fungus, is the issue with trying to treat with that. So there's really no treatment for it. The bad thing about too, as far as identifying it, is I think it looks a lot like European. Now, I'm not speaking from experience here because I've never had it, but from just the research I've done, looking at the pictures, I'm like, what's the difference between European and American? But this is just a big one. I think this one actually started over in Asia as well and has migrated. So all I know is every bee inspector is gonna look for it. If you question that you might have it, call your bee inspector, get them out here to look at it. When they also make test kits, so I think I put them in here. Yeah, these test kits here, they're good. Like, I recommend getting them. I think they're like 15 bucks off Amazon or something.
COVID test.
Yeah, and you can take the larva. I think you put it into this like little canister, shake it around for a while, and it'll tell you if you have. And they're specific, European and American. So I recommend getting both of them. And just if you ever have a scare, test it yourself or call your bee inspector. You know, if they got time, they'll run out, and I'm sure they'll happily test for it. But like I said, European, it's bad. You can fix it. American, burn your hive. Which, it's scary in that sense, but it's not like it's super common either. So, but ways to prevent it is low stress on the colony, which give them the best environment, keep them out in the sun, keep them well populated, and keeping them well populated, keeping strong colonies is really hard if you only got one. Having 2 or 3 is the best way to go because you can pull resources from a strong one, help a weaker one, move your stuff around like that. So, if you notice one's getting behind or needs, why ain't they drawing comb? Or what's going on here where they need young bees? Move some cat brood over, help them out. Rotate out your comb and don't acquire comb from a friend. I can't say that enough. And if you do, try it at your own risk, but I would just get rid of that wax. The other insects. So that's a wood roach up in there. You're gonna see them. Like they're everywhere. They're in the woods everywhere. They're in every wood pile. If you see them in your hive, they're not doing anything. They're not carrying diseases. They're not the German cockroaches that carry every disease. These are just the wood roaches. And they're gross to look at, but you're gonna see them. You'll see different spiders. They're not hurting the bees. If the bees ain't chasing them out of there, it's fine. It's nothing to worry about. Them European hornets, I always see them come around right around like mid-July, I'd say. They show up mid to end of July. It's like all of a sudden, boom, they're here and they're everywhere. And they eat honeybees. I see them all the time. They'll swoop down, catch them, and rip their heads off, and then take their bodies back, and the nest feeds on the body. That's from my knowledge of what they do.
Is this all hornets or?
So yellow jackets are actually meat eaters, I believe, and I think they will eat a honeybee, but yellow jackets are more or less a stressor. So like I've seen dead yellow jackets in the bottom of hives, meaning the hives can defend against them. And the European hornets, they're just jerks. Weird thing I've noticed about them, they're not really aggressive. I've been stung by one time, and I see them all over my place, mainly because of sugar syrup. Because when I'm really in the nectar dearth, when I'm feeding, I get these European hornets all over my sugar syrup totes, because they're sipping up all the stuff. They don't bug me none, but I don't like them because they eat my bees. To a strong colony, you're gonna see them around there. Don't freak out. But they can cause issues to a little nuke or a little one. But like I said, I don't really see them in the springtime, and I don't know their life cycle to know how why that is. But they're just kind of a stressor. Ants can be a stressor. Carpenter ants, they can destroy your wood, or else just regular ant colonies. I'll see them, especially in the springtime when I have this on here. I'll see ants kind of like building a nest on top of here. They're a stressor. I don't like them around my colonies, but the biggest thing too with these hornets is when I bucket feed. So this is a negative thing to bucket feeding. I put my buckets on top of here, I pop this cap off, and there'll be dribble of sugar syrup kind of coming off. That's what's bringing your hornets, and they're all over here. And I'll do the same thing. I'll hive tool them to death, start smacking them around, but that's a negative thing with bucket feeding. But yeah, that's kind of it I have as far as pests we got to watch for up here, and other insects that really can bug our honeybees in our area. So as far as treatment goes, typically you can't beat Man Lake's prices. Man Lake in my mind kind of owns the market right now. But that's the oxalic acid. Man Lake sells that too. You can get that. I'm not really sure about labeling on it, but you can get that a couple different places. Yeah, I think just about everywhere sells the same treatments. It's just, I think where people are lacking is how and when to use them. And like I can't tell you how many times people have used Formic in the dead of summer, and that's bad. That will kill a lot of bees or make them abscond. And then the next biggest thing is thinking it worked, because it doesn't always work. And I've used every one of them every way possible, and I've made the mistake of, well, I treated them in July, why do they still got mites? It just didn't work. Like, you got to do something else. Like, that mite load has to be handled, or else your bees will succumb to them. It's just, if you come into October and I should have put it in this slide, the alcohol wash of mites. It's a cup inside of a cup, and the inside cup has a bunch of holes in it, and you put rubbing alcohol in it, and you take literally a cup full of bees, dump it in there, and you start swishing it around. And that's the best way to test for mites. Or, yeah, like I said, you always got mites. There's other ways, but I think it's the most accurate way to test for mites. And what'll happen is the mites will die and fall out of the cup with holes in it to the bottom, and you can look up and count your mites. If you got one, you got too many. I've had mite counts up to 9, and that's when it's like, oh my goodness, let's do something. And so, if you do it and after your treatments and you're in October, you do it and you got 0, you might be okay. But if you do it and you're in October and you get 1, you got to do something. Because I've done that alcohol wash and I've gotten 0s, 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 and I still had a bad mite infestation. Because all you're doing is you're testing your nurse bees. Well, we know from the study, most of your mites are on your larvae. So, testing your nurse bees doesn't tell you everything about it. And especially if you pull nurse bees off of a honey frame, they're not gonna have it. They're on your brood frames. So testing your brood frames is probably your best chance of getting your most accurate mite readings.